A few days ago in the UK Parliament, Labour MP Tahir Ali called for the introduction of a blasphemy law. Keir Starmer responded by saying that Labour is committed to fighting all forms of hatred and division, including Islamophobia. Now, if this were to become a law, it would be a disaster for several reasons. Number one, it involves a massive restriction of our right to free speech. Number two, it would contribute to an atmosphere of domination and tyranny in the wider population. And number three, it is bound to be applied selectively, with double standards. Now, if you are like me, you will think that free speech is one of the most fundamental rights that a government must respect. A blasphemy law is a hate speech law, and hate speech laws are involving massive violations of our rights to free speech. In this case, what the governments are doing is they are trying to habituate us into not criticizing them. That's why they introduce hate speech laws, and that's why they introduce blasphemy laws. We are being habituated into not criticizing the government. And this is a massive danger, involves a massive danger, because the less a government is criticized, the more likely it becomes that it will abuse power. And in this case, what blasphemy laws are doing is that they want to steer public conversation, public discourse, away from particular topics. In this case, it will be used to silence critics of multiculturalism. Let's go to the next point, that it is, in fact, going to lead to an atmosphere of fear and domination. Now, if you think about it, on our everyday lives, we abide by rules that we consider less than ideal, because this is part of life. And this is how we, as a society, mitigate the inevitable frictions that arise from coexistence. But there's a world of difference between having clear rules and between having arbitrary rules. And the blasphemy laws are definitely going to be arbitrary, like any hate speech law. When the rules are clear, we know what to expect, we know the rules of the game, we play the game, and we can all go home. But when the rules are unclear, when they are arbitrary, we don't know exactly when we violate them or not, even if we don't consider them to be good rules. So what this does is essentially it leads into a situation where everyone will be potentially accused of violating the blasphemy law, subjected to the arbitrary whims of whoever is entrusted with enforcing that law. And let us go to the final bit, which has to do with selective application. Now, there is zero rational doubt as to whether this is going to be applied selectively or not. If you watch the clip, you will see Tahir Ali saying that November is, in the UK, a Islamophobia Awareness Month. Let me ask you this. Is there a Christianophobia Awareness Month? Is there a month where people are called to be aware of the persecution of Christians? That's a rhetorical question. Of course there is not. If you go here on the European Centre for Law and Justice, you will see that the Labour Christianophobia in human rights law is essentially used in several documents, but not, for instance, the ECHR. As it says here, Christianity is the most persecuted religion in the world. That is why the label Christianophobia is common in the language of international and regional human rights bodies. Most of them condemn together anti-Semitism, Islamophobia and Christianophobia. However, the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, uses the first two labels in its case law but has never mentioned Christianophobia as such. Now, let's focus a bit on the UN, because the UN is essentially an organization that indulges into massive virtue signaling. If you type Islamophobia on its search bar, you will see 17 results. And you will also see that there is an Islamophobia Day, the 15th of March. But if you type Christianophobia underneath, you will see that, sorry, no results can be found. Nothing is being done about it. So there is an Islamophobia Day, but there is not a Christianophobia Day. There is an Islamophobia Awareness Month, but there is not a Christianophobia Awareness Month. Let's see here, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, says for 2024 The International Day to Combat Islamophobia occurs at a time when we see a rising tide of anti-Muslim hate and bigotry in many parts of the world. So ask ourselves this: why are we not told about Christianophobia? Well, it is obviously a double standard. And the arguments that could be given against this point is, number one, that there is no persecution of Christians going on in the world, or that in the West, Christianity is not mocked, but it is criticized. Both of these claims are very much false. Now, if you want to see, Christianity is in fact one of the most persecuted religions in the world, arguably the most persecuted. You can start by opendoorsUS.org, and you will see here several stats about more than 365 million Christians suffer persecution and discrimination. So what does the UN have to say about them? What does the UN have to say about the persecution of Christians in Africa, for instance? Curiously, not much. But they have to say a lot about other religions, not the Christian religion. Right, so let us see here Peter Whittle's really excellent post. He says, Keir Starmer had the perfect opportunity here, handed to him on a plate, to state clearly that restrictions to free speech will not be tolerated, that we will not countenance a blasphemy law. He had the opportunity to stand up for our way of life. He did not. Remember this moment. And I completely agree with Peter Whittle on this. And in fact, I think that this shows us one of the most underappreciated points that we have to make about the contemporary political scene in the West, which a lot of people describe as woke progressive. In fact, it is a very regressive system. It doesn't take us forward. It doesn't change things for the better. It actually takes us backward. It changes things for the worst. And actually it does so with a rhetoric that suggests the exact opposite. So for instance, if you will see, in the name of liberation and in the name of protecting liberties, more and more civil liberties are taken away from us. We're taxed more, and we're also told that we cannot talk about it. And we're also told that we cannot talk about all sorts of things that contribute to the disintegration of our culture, because they're named phobias. In the name of popular government, you must have heard the terms our democracy, you will see that we are habituated into actually not being active citizens. We're habituated against criticizing the government. And this is a glaring contradiction. And then you will see that in the name of social justice, our world becomes increasingly less just. In the name of rationalizing the government is becoming way more arbitrary. So what is going on here is, in fact, the state is trying to hide the arbitrary use of power under a facade of legitimacy. All this is an attack on the spirit of the rule of law. And this is one of the major reasons why this blasphemy law and any kind of hate speech law is in fact a bomb into Western culture's foundations. If it goes forward, it would be a disaster.